What were some of the things that you were seeing yourself that were a result of the trauma that you'd experienced that the horses then helped you to address?
When I would go to the ranch, I really felt calm, but there were things in my body that were signaling that I wasn't. And that was the awareness that the horses gave me.
Are there things that you found yourself doing that helped you move out of that anxiety besides recognizing it and letting it be a little bit?
I didn't realize how much I was forcing and pushing my way through life because I've always been, again, quote unquote, successful. I've always been able to make something out of nothing. And I didn't realize that so much of that drive wasn't this positive motivation. It was my trauma.
A lot of us think healing is this one-time thing.
For me, it was like unraveling. I started pulling one thread on a ball of yarn, and then all of a sudden, all these threads started popping out. And if I pulled one, then another one would come out. And it was just a soft, like tugging of all of these different threads in my life. And as I cultivated more safety or a sense of safety, then another thread would appear.
We develop these things to keep ourselves safe, and that's what we need to do for that time being. What was that like for you to start going into that and letting go of some of that protection that you held on to for so long?
The horses helped me the most with that.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the Wild Mustang.
Ruby, thank you so much for joining me on the Touch of a Mustang podcast.
Shalise, thank you so much for having me.
I am really looking forward to hearing more about your story, especially because I felt that a lot of what you have to share resonated with me, and that is that horses were kind of there in a very pivotal moment of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's the story for a lot of people who are coming into the horse space now.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we can talk about your journey?
Yeah, my name is Ruby Fremon, and I am a trauma healing guide. My titles include a somatic experiencing practitioner in training, certified life coach, NLP practitioner, but what I actually really do with clients is I help them feel safe in their bodies again so that they can remember who they are and lead from that place of authentic expression.
Beautiful. Tell us a little bit about your journey with horses, how you first came to be involved with them and where that led.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with horses. I just remember even as a child, anytime I would see them, I was that girl that would run up to them and touch them when you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until 2023 when I was looking for an opportunity to just like give back. I was in the midst of a massive traumatic experience. I wanted to surround myself with the presence of animals because animals have always felt very calming to me when people didn't. And because the trauma involved my dog, and usually I would gravitate towards dogs, I decided to try horses because why not? So I started volunteering at a therapeutic ranch, and it just opened my eyes to much presence of the horses, their quiet nature, their wisdom, and the way in which they are just so sincere in their reflections really helped me heal. I don't think I understood just how much trauma was stuck in my body until I went there and would notice how they responded or reacted to me. And so through my work at the therapeutic ranch, alongside with continuing my education in somatic experiencing, I began to see this other opportunity to work with horses in a holistic therapeutic way that didn't involve riding, that didn't involve forcing them to do things that they weren't ready to do, but really just working alongside them as a quiet presence to mirror back what people are not quite ready to or haven't yet seen in themselves, because that's what happened with me in my experience. And so that's when I started weaving together my work with horses as my co-facilitator. And I'm still in the beginning stages of this and learning something new every single day, learning how to work with horses in a very humane way. And it's just opened my eyes to this whole other way of being in the world, where everything doesn't have to be so forced. Like, we can actually move through the world with more gentleness and humility and presencing ourselves to what is here now.
Go as much in depth or as little as you would like. What were some of the things that you were seeing yourself that were a result of the trauma that you'd experienced that the horses then helped you to address?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much anxiety I was holding. It was interesting because I knew I had PTSD, but I wasn't really sure. I guess I couldn't grasp how it was showing up in my body. And so when I would go to the ranch, I really felt calm, but there were things in my body that were signaling that I wasn't. And that was the awareness that the horses gave me, because I would go and there's this horse named Hercules, an 18-hand Belgian, and I just absolutely adored him. But some days he would just look at me and be like, pin ears, walk away. And it really made me question how I was showing up. Because again, cognitively, I could say that I was showing up in a calm, peaceful manner. But obviously my body language was saying something else and communicating something else. So that told me, and also helped me realize that there's still a lot more for me to heal, and that I get to do it in layers. Because I think there's always this rush to heal and feel better and get back to business and work, because I had to let my entire business go. And there was that sense of I need to just get healed and get back to what I was doing. And their reflections, and they kept reflecting it for months on end. You're not ready. You're not ready. Your body is telling us something else. And that I use that as an invitation to continue diving deeper into my own.
Yeah, I love that, using it as an invitation. And that really resonates with me. When I got my first Mustang, I had like an aha moment, like how much anxiety I was carrying. I had no idea how much anxiety that I was just holding on to. So it's something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about in my conversations, but I found the same thing, that they can really bring that awareness that maybe we didn't even realize what we were carrying.
And there was something neat too that I started exploring with one of my horse mentors, who taught me about the importance of congruence with horses. And it's not that they're reading the anxiety and saying we don't want to be around the anxiety. They were reading the dissonance between like how I was showing up and the identity that I was wearing versus what they were reading in my body. And it wasn't matching. And so I started to learn to drop that identity slowly, like articles of clothing. Like, you just slowly start to take layers off. And if I just presented myself, my anxious self or my sad self, or the self that was really grieving, the horses, they welcomed me and they could be in my presence. But it was anytime I turned the identity on, and this was so subtle, I didn't even know that I was doing it. I mean, I've been quote unquote in the work for so long. I've been a life coach since 2014. So there was also that ego piece that I had to just dissolve and just show up with humility and say, this is where I'm at. So often there were shifts where I would be shoveling horse poop and crying, and the horses were fine with that. What they weren't fine with was when I would try and put on a mask and appear as something that I wasn't. And that was really, I think that was one of the biggest gifts they gave me. They really taught me about congruence and how it's okay to show up just as you are. And it can be safe to show up just as you are.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because in the human world, we really value those masks. It's kind of like we get really uncomfortable when someone starts having a breakdown like that or whatever. And you don't get that with the horses. It is just, they're just, all right, do your thing.
Yeah. They don't judge you. They don't try and fill the void with context that doesn't exist. They just see it and they respond to it, and that's it.
Yeah. Are there things that you found yourself doing that helped you move out of that anxiety besides kind of recognizing it and just letting it be a little bit?
Well, at the same time, I was doing a lot of therapy with my therapist, who is also a somatic experiencing practitioner. So I was both going through the SEP program, I'm still in it, while also receiving it. And because I started dropping pieces of my work until I basically had no business left, I started filling that space with more time at the ranch, more time with the horses, or more self-care, which involved really just slowing down. I didn't realize how much I was forcing and pushing my way through life because I've always been, again, quote unquote, successful. I've always been able to make something out of nothing. And I didn't realize that so much of that drive wasn't like this positive motivation. It was my trauma and the little girl in me that had to take care of herself. So she had to force and push her way through life. And watching how, just observing the herd and watching how they work together and move together and how it's not rushed unless we've got treats in your pockets.
Yeah.
But they're not rushing and they're not forcing, they're just present in every moment. And there's something so beautiful about witnessing such large animals just being fully present and then coming back to yourself and reflecting on all the ways in which you haven't been present, and not with shame, but with a curiosity of like, I wonder how life would look if I just started focusing on being in the here and now and not always trying to rush to the next thing, which included my own healing.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that because I think you're right. A lot of us think healing is like this one-time thing. You have some experience and then it's just easy going moving forward. I found that, like you said, it happens in layers or steps or, even you overcome one thing that you struggled with and then another thing comes up that you're like, now I need to address that. Talk a little bit more about that and how that happened and unfolded for you. If you're like me, it's still a process of kind of figuring life out. You'd think, okay, we're in midlife, we should have it figured out. Like, it's more confusing now.
Yeah, I feel like midlife is actually when everything starts to hit.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like you're old enough to have the wisdom, but also now ready enough to see the things that you didn't see before. I feel like healing comes in layers. Our psyche, our somas, our bodies, our minds, like they're built for self-preservation. So we are literally built to preserve our life. And so everything that our body does, our mind does, our thoughts, our beliefs, all of these things are working to keep us alive. And it's not always the healthiest ways that the body does that, but the body learns how through our traumas. And so for me, it was like the only way I can describe it is like unraveling. Like I started pulling one thread on a ball of yarn, and then all of a sudden, all these threads started popping out. And if I pulled one, then another one would come out. And it was just like a soft, like tugging of all of these different threads in my life. And as I cultivated more safety or a sense of safety, then another thread would appear because we can only go as deep as we feel safe. And so the healing journey, as much as we want it to look unidirectional, where it's just like we get to the end goal and we're healed.
Yay, we're done.
Yeah.
Be so
Wouldn't that
great.
be nice? Yeah, it's not like that. I mean, healing trauma isn't what happens to us. It's how it's the imprint that is left in our body. And quite often it's these stuck trauma responses that continue to shift our behavior and identity as we grow. But because we are still growing and evolving in life, we have we are put in situations where we can actually acquire more trauma. And so the goal isn't to become immune to trauma. The goal is to continue to build upon our capacity and our resilience.
Yeah.
Anytime we face our trauma and heal, we build capacity and we build resilience and we build that sense of safety. But again, that doesn't make us immune to experiencing trauma. And we can even use an example of horses. Like you can send one horse to one trainer and the trainer traumatizes them. Then they go to another trainer that really helps them work through the trauma. And now the horse is like quote unquote fixed. It feels safe against with humans again. It's coming out of its shell, but then all of a sudden it has a bad experience with another human and they're withdrawn again. Like this is exactly what happens to us. And the more comfortable I use that word, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. The more I accepted the fact that I might be healing for a long time, the easier it became for me to just be present in it and allow my healing to unfold. And I think that if I hadn't done that and I had just forced my way through it, I would have bypassed a lot of important key lessons and insights and opportunities for me to actually work through this on a, not just like a cognitive level, but a physical, somatic level of healing. And that's not to say that I'm healed now. I'm not presenting myself as someone who is like healed. I am healing and I am devoted to this path. And I say that with both humility and also a lot of compassion for myself, which is something that I wouldn't have been able to do like 5 years ago. I would have probably judged myself hard for being here.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, that point that you made about how life doesn't necessarily become easy, as in there's no obstacles. We don't have hard things to face, but we are building up our ability, our capacity to handle them in healthier, better ways as we lean into understanding ourselves more, becoming more in touch with our bodies, with our emotions.
Yeah.
You talked about how you had this drive and motivation, and that was kind of a protective factor. And I think that's true for a lot of us. We develop these things to keep ourselves safe, and that's what we need to do for that time being. What was that like for you to start kind of going into that and letting go of some of that protection that you held on to for so long?
I would say, well, therapy, of course, helped with that, but the horses helped me the most with that. I would say, like learning how to work with them and have them as my co-facilitators and noticing how anytime I tried to apply that former identity or like aspects or textures of that former self that was motivated by a goal versus like by what's here, the horses responded to that and it felt like we would disconnect. It's the only way I could describe it. It just felt like our connection would just break. Whereas when I would show up and just be like, okay, I'm here, I really, in the depth of my bones, feel like this is the work that I'm meant to be doing, and I'm just going to allow it to unfold, our connection would be there. Like I would feel fully connected with this herd of horses. That it felt like the opposite of what I experience in the human world, where people often, when you have everything, when you have like a top rated podcast and you're known for things and people like you, they want to come to you, they want a piece of you. And I experienced that a lot. So the more motivation and drive and push I put out into the world, the bigger I was, the more people I attracted to me. But with horses, it's like the opposite. You just have to show up as yourself. And so not only did they show me that motivation doesn't have to be attached to like this external goal, that it can be something that's really internal and really soulful, but they taught me that the drive doesn't have to be so hard and fast. It can be really soft and gentle and subtle. And the way that they would respond to me when I'd show up in that way it was like the human connection that I'd craved my entire life, but also pushed away. They were able to give that to me. And then I started applying it in my human life with other humans.
Yeah.
And I also started to notice a difference. It's just in the types of humans I choose to have around me now.
What was that like, letting go of all that? Probably the place where you were feeling fulfillment to an extent. You were feeling other people were kind of giving you that positive feedback that you were doing things so good, even though internally you knew like you needed to change something. What was that like, letting go of all of those worldly acclamations and encouragement and positive reinforcement in favor of turning into yourself and deciding to take care of the things that were arising?
That was the dark night of my soul.
Yeah.
And the second I say part two because I experienced the first one in my early 20s, but this one was like the one that really like I'm on the tail end of it, and it's been 5 years. It just took a long time because I was gripping so tightly to some identities that I didn't realize were still there. I didn't know how much of my identity was built around what I had accomplished. I didn't realize how much of my identity was built around how people saw me or viewed me or perceived me. And so when you let all of that go, there was the physical letting go of my business. I started by letting go of my podcast. Then I let go of my mastermind and group programs, and I held on to like private clients. And then I let go of that, and soon there was nothing. And I had to ask myself the question, who am I without any of this? There was a point in time when I was so physically ill during this period where I could no longer go to the gym. And I'm like a self-proclaimed gym rat. So then it became, who am I without this identity of like this fit body? Who am I without this group of people around me? Who am I without these friends that I once had? And I feel like that is the essence of the dark night of the soul. And that's what I went through. And it was really hard. And there were times when I would just go to the ranch to grieve because all I wanted was a quiet presence. I didn't want humans that would interrupt my grief because it was too uncomfortable for them to sit with and they wanted to
Yeah.
give advice. I just wanted the horses around me. There was a lot of times I went to the ranch and cried, and they would just hold me energetically, and also just that feeling of being welcome just as you are, like this puddle of nothingness.
Yeah.
It was like, we all want to be loved for who we are, but I think the problem is that most of us don't know who we are because we've been
Mm,
so busy trying to be who we think we need to be
yeah.
to get the love that we want. And so when we start to let go of those pieces, there's this liminal state where you're just kind of floating around and you don't know who you are. You're meeting yourself on the other side of trauma, on the other side of these accolades, on the other side of these perceptions and self-judgments. And you're meeting yourself for the first time. And so I think it's important when you're in that liminal space to just have like a soft space to land where you don't have to worry about being judged. And the horses were always that place for.
Yeah, definitely a plug for going to horses if you need to cry. That's definitely something that I also have
Yes.
done. I'm like, they're a good place to go to kind of release that and to be able to just let it out and to grieve, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit more about how these changes affected you physically. That's a big part of what the work you do now.
Mm-hmm.
How did it affect you, and what are some things you did to overcome?
Yeah, so I've always been a firm believer that our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health are completely interconnected. And when one aspect is off, it will affect all other aspects of who we are. And so for me, my physical body has always been very easily swayed by my emotional body. And so as I was going through the trauma and processing the traumatic event and just like really working through that, for a while, I was just stuck in fight. And then there came a time when I completely collapsed. Like there was just no more fight. I had no energy. I went into a dorsal vagal state and was catatonic, meaning completely, utterly numb to the world, completely.
Yeah.
And during that time, I believe is when my body started breaking down, but because I was so disassociated, it was hard for me to tell. And then once I started coming back into my body through somatic therapy, I started to notice and feel the changes. And for someone who has been athletic her entire life to suddenly feel like my body is working against me, it's painful to walk. It's painful to go up and down the stairs. I was thrust into a very early menopause. My body just kind of like skipped everything. So I was thrust into that, and I didn't know that's what was going on because we as women don't talk about it. And doctors, of course, gaslit that piece because I was younger than most people when they go through it.
Mm.
So there was like a multitude of things happening that caused my body to become so inflamed. And I remember like when I started volunteering at the therapy ranch, that was when I was still experiencing a lot of physical pain. But for some reason, when I would be there, I could shovel poop for hours and walk, 10,000 steps back and forth, getting all the horses, feeding them. And there was like this sense of aliveness in my body, but anywhere else, I was detached from that. So my work there really helped me anchor into hope. Like, this isn't the end. My body is not falling apart. I think it's just tired of holding, the holding pattern that we can often get stuck in. And it needed to collapse, and it needed to rest, and it needed to find new ways to thrive that didn't involve having to like hold something that wasn't true. And so that really aligned with the whole aspect of like letting these identities go, because my body was physically holding all of these identities. And then, of course, like doing a bunch of work on my hormones and figuring out what was what, because I was having a lot of complex PTSD symptoms, like instantaneous memory loss, forgetting where I was. But I was also having hormonal memory loss. And so the more work I did on my mental and emotional health, the more I was able to discern between what was what. And so slowly I just started putting the pieces back together. But again, like in the past, I would have rushed this process. Like, my body's not feeling good. Let's force it to feel good. Let's do this. Let's force it to go to the gym. Let's force it to work out. Let's force it to do all these cleanses and diets and all these things to just get it back to a state of homeostasis. But at this point, my body was like, actually, what we need is to just chill out and like not do anything and just rest and sleep and nourish ourselves and not deplete ourselves through water fasts and, all sorts of other types of cleanses. And so that's what I did. I just took my time, and it was excruciatingly frustrating to do so because I'm not used to taking so much time to do things. But in that process, I learned a lot about my body and the wisdom it carries, and that we truly do have different chapters of life in our bodies, and we're not meant to use them in the same ways as we did when we were younger. So I've learned to approach life with more respect to my body and my actual physical capacity versus trying to continue to force it to move in ways it doesn't want to, or to force it into a state of illness. I look at it as it was like I was really taking my time to nourish my body to repair itself versus like forcing all the pieces back together.
Yeah, it's so interesting because rest for sure is something that we don't really value very much. It's always go and do more. And so that's something that I also found, like I would feel guilty resting, like I should be doing something, instead of being like, no, that's exactly what you should be doing. But I also think it's so valuable to lean into being able to feel those different things. I think we're taught in our culture, society to, repress emotions, to ignore things in our body instead of being curious or even thinking about them. And it sounds like, and something I also found is the horses kind of help you to see like, oh, wait, hold on. You need to go back a couple steps because back here is where the problem is originating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they really show you what it's like to be present in your awareness, because I think it's really easy for humans to just skip to what's ahead of us or focus on what's behind us and not really know what's happening in our bodies in this moment in time. But when we understand that, like, for example, me coming to acceptance of like, this is where I'm at in my womanhood, like this is now where I'm at, versus trying to force my way past that or bypass that completely. That acceptance really helped me find ways to then thrive in this era of my life.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about acceptance, because it's probably something that I'm like, oh, this is such an important principle that I just have been fighting for so long. How did that help once you kind of did accept it, that this is your reality, instead of wishing for it to be different, or like you say, trying to force it to be different? How did that acceptance help things to change?
I'll start by saying I didn't realize that I spent a huge chunk of my dark night trying to go back to who I was, like trying to heal so I could be who I was. There was a definite lack of acceptance that things were changing. And that, I feel like that's what prolonged the process for sure, was my
Yeah.
grip on like, I just need to go back to the way things were. I want to be who I was. Once I started to be more present with what was happening, I started to look at it as chapters of life, like a book. Like, okay, now maybe it's not about going back. Maybe I'm meant to go forward with a different type of capacity, energetically, physically, and in a different way. And maybe that's the point. And it was like the more I accepted that piece of I'm never going to be who I was, but that part of me will always be part of me, the easier it became to unravel, to let go of the identities, to welcome my truth and really the truest expression of who I am to come to the surface, and to also let that part of me be seen. I was just talking to one of my best friends yesterday who was laughing at one of my Instagram stories, and she was like, "I love it when you show up like this." And I said, "Yeah, you know what's interesting is like I never used to show my funny side online. I'm awkward and funny in real life. And now, like, that I have no identities left, I'm kinda like, I don't really care. Like, this is just all of me. And if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, okay, cool. Like, just keep going like a horse. If they don't
Yeah.
like it, they will just walk
They'll
away."
walk away. They'll go to a
Yeah.
different corner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's over it. You know, when enough horses have done that to you, you start to not take it personally. So, yeah, it's just, I really feel like the process of acceptance has so much to do with acknowledging where you're at and what's actually happening versus what was. And then understanding that there is a future. It's just, it can look different. Can you accept what's happening in the here and now? And once we do, we gain the ability to move forward. But if we don't accept and we're in denial or we're trying to fight for what was, that's when we get stuck. And I was stuck in that stage of my dark night for a really long time. It was actually Chloe, who you had on the show, who told me. She was like, "What if everything is going to look really different?" And I was just like, "Chloe, don't tell me that." Like when she
I don't
first
want it
told me, I
to.
was like, "Don't tell me that." And I had recorded that conversation with her, and I ended up re-listening to it like 6 months later, and I was like, now I know what she's talking about. Now I know.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I experienced the same thing where, I had this vision for what I wanted life to be like, and nothing, turned out the way that I thought it would be. And I think that we often do that. It's a very human thing to be so in our minds to just absolutely torture ourselves with those thoughts of how things should have been, or how you wish they were different, or how you want them to be. What are some things that you did to kind of lean into that acceptance, to be like, okay, I'm going to be okay being where I actually am, instead of living in my head in a different place and torturing myself because that's not my reality right now?
I think it was a couple things. One, there was like this external reflection that was presenting itself through the people who were in my life, but now exiting. And I mean, when you go through a dark night, you really start to get clear on who's meant to be by your side. And I really do believe that every relationship serves a purpose, but not all relationships are meant to be there forever. And so as I started to lose a lot of people, that reflected back to me. That gave me a lot of information and also helped me see who was there for me, but then also opened my eyes to the people who started showing up for me. And then that translated into, well, if these different people are showing up for me, maybe there's different opportunities, maybe there are different paths. And with the horses from the therapy ranch, I was referred to a woman who had just purchased 14 acres and had a herd of 3 and a mini donkey. And she was like, "I'd love for you to come and work here, and you can do your work here and see clients." And I wasn't able to do that at the therapy ranch because they were a path certified ranch, and I preferred to do somatic experiencing. So I moved there, and I mean, that opportunity would have never presented itself had I been so stuck on my vision of what my business was prior to that. And so it was just little experiences like that that started to slowly open my eyes to different ways of moving forward in life that look nothing like what I had planned. I wouldn't say it was like one thing. I think it was like a bunch of different things that started to show up, from people to experiences to opportunities, and then me realizing, wow, okay, what would happen if I just let these things happen and let these things unfold in my life? And that's what I did. And slowly this new path started being laid brick by brick, and I have no idea where it's going. I really don't. Even right now, I have no idea where it's going. And all I know is I absolutely love being in the presence of horses. I absolutely love working with them and doing my work alongside them. That is a knowing. How things are going to come into fruition or how they're going to be shaped, I don't know. And 5 years ago, that would have really been hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, it's very challenging right now, but I'm in a deeper acceptance. It's challenging and I accept the challenge of just
Yeah.
letting life unfold.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because really none of us know where our future is going to lead, but we really think we do. And we become really attached to where we think it should be. And then turns out that's pretty painful if it doesn't unfold that way. But I think when we can live in reality, live where we're at, we start to see the beauty of how it turned out differently, not how we expected or not how we maybe even worked for and planned on, but yet there's still good there and new things that we might not have even thought of.
Yeah. And so much of that has to do with letting go of control, which has to do with learning to feel safe in the world. We try to control the world around us and our vision and our future because we don't feel safe. That's where that comes from. So the more safety you can cultivate from within, the easier it is to be accepting of this concept that you can just lay your path down brick by brick. You don't have to have the whole path laid out for you.
Yeah. And it's also so interesting because I find so many commonalities in what you've been through, so many patterns. And I feel like, why does nobody talk about this? Why was this such a shock to me? Because it seems like almost a typical life path of some things that happens in different stages of life.
Yeah. I think people don't talk about it because I don't know. I think women don't talk about it enough because there is still like so much mystery in this weird midlife space, liminal space of life. And there's also a lot of projection in that space, but we also do a lot of shaming and self-judgment when we're going through it. But I think the more that we have conversations like this, the easier it becomes to remove that judgment because we realize like other people are going through it too or have been through it. This is just a part of the cycle of life.
Talk a little bit more about shame and how that impacted you and also how you overcame that, because that was also a huge one for me that like really kept me stuck and really beating myself up a lot because of the shame that I felt.
It was something I have been familiar with my entire life. I grew up in a culture that was very much about shame and ego, bringing shadows to the family name, having to hold up the cultural standards. It was a lot of that. And so shame was something that I was very, very accustomed to feeling. And I would probably even go as far as to say I was carrying shame pretty much my entire life. And so when I started going through this recent dark night, there was another layer of shame involved that was really coming from this place of I should know better because of the work that I do. Like you would think that someone who's been in the healing space for so many years would just instantly know what to do. But I had no idea what to do. And the shame kicked in around that. And then I felt like, well, who am I to be doing this work if I can't even get myself out of this? Like, who am I to be leading people? And it was just a complete deconstruction. And shame is, the densest, heaviest energy for us to carry. And it really feels like that. It's like a dark, heavy cloak.
Yeah.
And I really feel and believe that one of the greatest ways to work through our shame is to have someone witness us without judgment. Because shame really comes from the judgmental place within us and within others. So if you can have someone witness you, a friend, a therapist, people around you who can just see you and validate your experience and acknowledge what you're going through, they don't have to understand it. But for them to validate, yeah, this is like a lot for anyone to carry or go through. You can instantly, you can instantly relax. Your shoulders drop. You're like, oh my God, someone actually is validating that this shit is hard. And then you stop shaming yourself. And so I do believe like healing really happens in being witnessed by people who are compassionate and empathetic. And so that was what really helped me. And it was a couple of my best friends, who they're now my best friends, and my therapist, who were able to hold me through that and witness me through that, and my husband, without judgment, because we're so busy judging ourselves that the shame becomes super dense and it becomes hard to see what's what, like what's actually true. So if we can have someone actually go in and shed some light on what's going on and be like, no, what you're going through is really a lot, we can just let go of that shame for a minute.
Yeah, it's so heavy. Do you have any advice for people who might be carrying that and maybe don't feel like they have those safe supports in their life?
Yeah, go find a herd of horses.
No joke,
I'm not
honestly.
joking. Yeah. Go find a herd of horses and go just plop a chair down and sit in front of them because they won't judge you. But I think this
Yeah.
is also why a lot of people gravitate towards animals and say animals are so healing. It doesn't have to be a horse. It can be any animal, but horses are great. This is where it can be hard because I think when people find themselves in spaces where they don't feel seen by their friends when they're going through a challenging time, then that's probably a sign that that friendship isn't going to make it through.
Yeah.
And that in itself holds a lot of grief. And we can often internalize that and then create shame around that. Like, I'm not good enough for my friends. They're all leaving me. They're abandoning me. And you start to feel even more shame. And that's when I say you have to just start looking elsewhere, and if that is like hiring professional help, hire professional help, but put yourself in environments that really foster compassion and kindness so that you can begin seeing yourself with compassion and kindness. So if you don't have it in your life, please seek it out. And for me, like that did start with the horses. It started with me volunteering at a therapeutic ranch.
Yeah, it really is so tricky because it's like, here, I need these supports and I need my identity to keep my people in place, but I'm restructuring my identity. So these people are leaving and, what am I left with? But I think those are some really good suggestions of things that anyone can do. And, truly, if there's not people, there are animals for sure. Talk to us a little bit more about your ancestral connection with horses. That's something you mentioned that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it's really interesting because so I'm Punjabi, Sikh religion, and I would say like I wasn't a devout Sikh, but I went to Sikh school when I was younger and I studied Sikhism and I did my prayers every day until like my first dark night of the soul when I was around 22. And I was like, God, nothing is working out. And then I just went completely silent with God for a long time. And so Sikhism it's always been here. But what I didn't start noticing until I started working with horses was how all the depictions of horses in our artwork with alongside our gurus. It's like my eyes would see the horses, but never registered, oh my God, that's a horse. So horses are part of our lineage. And so as I started working with horses, I started becoming more and more connected to my religion again and learning more about our connection and our heritage with horses. And our horses actually, the way that our gurus worked with them was in partnership. Like they really held reverence to our horses and they rode our horses to battle. The horses helped in so many ways, but they were treated with respect and reverence as partners to our gurus. And they say that, so seva, that term seva that people often use, selfless service, that comes from Sikhism. So that is a foundational principle of our religion, is to engage in seva. And they say that doing seva for a horse for a year is the equivalent of 10 years of seva. And that's just because of how much we owe horses who our gurus rode into battle and really supported us through times of hardship and war in our country. And so the more that I started to recognize that, the more I realized that this connection that I had with horses and the ease in which I was experiencing how to be around them wasn't just like a natural gift. It was this innate knowing passed down from my ancestors of how to be with them. And despite how, there was a lot of things that I saw in the horse world I don't like force being used on horses. I think there's another way. And I could never really understand why that felt so deeply agitating when I would see it and upsetting. But then tying it back to my religion and the way that we really hold reverence to our horses made sense because I was like, we treat them with love and we treat them with respect, and we owe them our lives. And, our future really had so much to do with how they showed up for us during those times of battle. So there's still so much more that I'm learning about our lineage, but it's been wild to see just how deep this connection really is, and that recognition that horses have always been part of my blood. Maybe not this lifetime, but they've always been part of my blood.
Yeah. It's beautiful because I think when you're around horses, especially in maybe not doing and having your mind busy doing stuff, but just kind of present with them, it really is a spiritual experience, I would say, where you kind of enter a different dimension, or even just that present dimension, where a lot of the things that you're maybe worried about or are weighing heavy on you really do just seem to go away for that moment. Definitely have found it also to be a very spiritual experience. It's really beautiful. Also something I'm like, so interesting to look at the history. That's something I would love to look more at. Tell us about the work that you're doing now with horses.
Yeah, the work that I do now is equine-assisted somatic experiencing, which I call equia. And we don't ride horses. We don't force them to do anything. So I prefer working with like free range herds. What it is really observing the herd and observing ourselves. So in observing the herd, we observe aspects of ourselves, and also just seeing what shows up for us. So that can look like coming into the pasture and just seeing which horse wants to approach and what that brings up for a client. And that in itself offers enough context for me to work with. Say they had an attachment to a specific horse coming forward and that horse doesn't come forward. In fact, that horse might pin their ears and be like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Well, then that client might experience an activation of their abandonment wound. And right there, we have something to work with. And so we don't really need the horses to do anything. It's just their presence. And to me, that form of partnership makes so much sense, more so than doing trauma work with clients, human clients, while like traumatizing the horses by forcing them to do things. Like that never made sense to me. So working with them in a way where I can also show like this is what it's like to be around these very large animals safely and also respectfully, because isn't that what we want for ourselves as well? To have our boundaries respected, to have our space respected, and not to be forced or pushed to do anything. And so I weave in the work of somatic experiencing, which is really less about the context of the trauma and more about how that trauma has imprinted in the body. So holding patterns, we might be stuck that often, like a lot of people, women especially, can have a really deep unconscious fawning response. They're always pleasing. But again, like horses don't respond to that because it's incongruent. And so to see how that pattern gets disrupted in the field and for them to experience that is really powerful. And then we start to work with that and how that's showing up in the body. What are you noticing in your body right now? Oh, like my stomach's really tight and I'm breathing really heavily. Okay, like let's just look back at the herd and just notice what's happening with the herd. And they're able to almost like safely exit the body, not in a disassociative way, but in a way where they can observe the herd, but they're actually observing themselves, if that makes sense. And then we can return to the body with a deeper sense of safety. So that's the work that I do and absolutely love. Like it just feels like everything in my life has led me to this moment, and this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I really love the idea of working with them as my co-facilitators and partners versus like the horses that do things for me.
Yeah. And so beautiful because it sounds like you had no idea that this is the path that you would go down.
No, I mean, I joke around with my husband often because when we first met, I was like club promoter, nightlife promoter, getting together, 1,000-person raves, things like that, wearing mini skirts and oh, it was so different. And I was like, did you ever think that the girl that you fell in love with would end up wanting to get acres and get horses? And he'd immediately, no, never in a million years.
Yeah.
But, here we are in Montana doing that now. So it's beautiful to let go of the reins of how we thought we wanted our lives to unfold so that we can actually open ourselves up to the magic of what wants to unfold.
Yeah. Are there horses in your background that you especially remember that left particular impact on you?
Hercules is definitely one of them. He was the biggest horse I had the opportunity to work with up until that point. And he's a retired police horse. So, he's very strong in his personality, and he will let you know when he doesn't want to do something. And when I was at that ranch, I was shown how to get him to do things. But as soon as I started just following him and leading by understanding his behavior and respecting his no's versus trying to force his no to be a yes, I noticed that he started to respect me more. And so that taught me a lot about life and relationships. And then another horse, this was with my friends herd that I was actually working with clients. This horse was Tori, and she's another half draft horse, and she has ring hock and ring bone, and also just aging. And it was a small herd of 3. And so the other 2 horses, being prey animals, they were kind of like, okay, well, let's just push her out of the herd. But I took that so personally, and I would project and say they're bullying her. And it really took a lot for me to understand these are horses just being horses. And then, of course, like, she started feeling better when she was put on the right medication, and then the herd became a herd again. And I don't know, that just left, like, Tori continued being Tori throughout that, like, from being what I perceived bullied by the herd to then being welcomed back into the herd. Like, she was just Tori the whole time. Nothing changed. And she was just being herself. Even when she was in so much pain, she was just showing it. And that taught me a lot about how you can just be who you are, and you will be accepted by a herd of humans,
The right ones, yeah.
The right ones. I feel like every horse has left an impression, but those are the 2 that really, really stand out. But I love them all.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your story and so much of your experience. Can you tell everybody, if they want to take advantage of your services or work with you, where can they find you? Can they go to learn more about you and the things that you're doing?
Yeah, the best place would be my website, rubyfremon.com. That's Fremon. And then you can also go on my Instagram, which is ruby.fremon. And my Substack link is linked both on the website and on my Instagram. And from those 2 places, you'll be able to find all of my offerings and services, and also my writing.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story and your experiences. As we kind of talked about, it's something that a lot of people go through and not everyone necessarily wants to talk about. But I think that by having conversations like this, by you sharing your personal experiences, it really can be a service to other people and to help them know, like, there is a path forward. There's a way through this, no matter how dark and horrible it feels sometimes, that there are things that you can do to help you get through it and to make forward movement. And I think you really shared a lot of those things that helped you. So I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having this conversation with me and for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.
Our emotions are such an important part of how we respond to life. And if you've been around horses, you know that the emotions you have impact the horses. But not just horses, your emotions also impact yourself and those around you. If you would like to have greater awareness and regulation of your emotions, check out my guided resources. I have one on the Touch of a Mustang Ko-fi page, which will be linked below. I also have a guided journal that is Emotional Mastery for Horsemanship that shares how you can use your emotions to benefit your time with your horse. And for those who don't have horses or would like to work more on your emotional life outside of horses, I have a guided journal called Emotional Mastery on Amazon. They're all linked below. I have had so many people reach out and tell me how much The awareness of your emotions and the tracking of your emotional state has helped them. And if it's something you're looking for, it may just help you as well.